Hey folks, welcome to Unscripted, where we've got something to say, we're just not quite sure what it is yet. Today, we'll be taking a look at Funimation's recent announcements that they would be editing Dance and the Vampire Bundt DVDs and broadcast, as well as announcing later...
You said Dance and the Vampire Bundt. That's a cake.
Dance and the...
Alright, so let's go over the story real quick first. Funimation announced that they had licensed Vampire Bundt, and then shortly thereafter they announced they would be editing it. Fans unleashed a terror never yet seen by mankind before that time.
Well, what's so interesting about that is that Funimation has not had a track record of editing things.
No, not particularly. Strike Witches is going unedited. They streamed it edited. But I believe that's at the that's what has always all the companies that show stuff that has edited versions at all. When they stream it in the U.S., it's virtually always the streamed version.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's been true for a bunch of stuff on Crunchyroll.
Of course, they actually did air the unedited version on their stream.
It depends on the channel.
Very shortly. No, Funimation, when they did Strike Witches.
Oh, yes, I believe that was a...
And they had that up for a couple days, and it shot up their PR count. Not in the most positive of ways, but... Good job, guys. I was winking with my eyes there.
I actually did wink a little bit before.
Yeah, but yours was probably successful.
Probably.
And anyway, so several days later, we got a statement saying that they would consider editing it. That they said that after thorough review, after hearing fan complaint, that they looked through and said that nothing was so gratuitous that...
They said they did not conclude yet. They said that they are going to wait and see how the last... Because it's not finished running in Japan.
No.
There are episodes left to go. So they are going to watch the last batch of episodes in Japan and make a decision then.
So, you've actually seen some of the episodes, the ones they have streaming right now?
I actually have only watched the first episode streaming so far.
And that's the edited version, or is that the unedited?
I actually don't think there was anything in it that required editing, but I'm sure since it was streaming that it would have been the edited version if any edits were made to the first episode.
Now this becomes an interesting thing. Are we being a demanding audience that wants to see something, or are we being snotty? What are they even editing out?
Well, the problem with the material is that, the main character may be centuries old, but looks like, an 11-year-old girl.
As vampires go.
And she runs around frequently in little to practically no clothing, which makes a few people nervous, especially in the wake of the Chris Hanley sentencing. And I thought it was very interesting. There were a lot of people who thought, they're just being overreacted to the Chris Hanley sentencing, and then there were a bunch of other fans who were talking about, oh no, it doesn't have anything to do with Hanley, it's just Funimation being weird. But when they came out and they launched their statement, they said specifically that they were going to watch those last episodes to ensure that they could show it uncensored, while unedited, without breaking the law. So it seems to me that they were kind of implicitly stating that Hanley's sentencing actually was a big factor in there.
Well, and given that they have no track record of editing works beforehand for DVDs, then it seems less likely to say that it is unmotivated, that this Handley thing, which is kind of still having reverberations, we're still all kind of responding. I don't know, have we heard any other responses from anyone else in the industry about that kind of thing?
Oh, I've heard a lot of things, but that's because I'm working on a particular feature.
Plug.
Well, it's not up yet, so you can't plug anything.
Oh.
I haven't finished it yet.
Well, look, foreshadowing.
I do think another thing that a lot of people forget about Funimation is that their parent company, Navar, is a publicly traded company on the stock market. It's, I think NAVR is the stock ticker.
In case you want to invest in Funimation or something.
Well, Navar does a bunch of other entertainment stuff, but Funimation is a big one for them. And I think that they do, in addition to worrying, of all the companies that might potentially run into trouble with the law and fight against it, Funimation is probably the one that would be least likely, I would think, because it's publicly traded. Because when you're publicly traded, I think you're less likely to want to push those boundaries, which does not mean, obviously, that Funimation is not putting out plenty of fan-servicey stuff. That has never been a problem for them. And like they said, Strike Witches would continue completely unedited. I also wonder if it doesn't have something to do with the Japanese licensors, because... people in Japan often look at America and say, oh, those people like to sue the shit out of everybody. Oh, they're all freaky obsessed about things. And they shoot people, too. So I wonder if the licensors in Japan weren't the ones who actually expressed concern. And now Funimation's having to figure out what they can do there. And that's just my speculation. I don't know if that's actually true or not.
I would be surprised if we found out that the Japanese companies were that aware or involved or whatever the case is, because this is aired in Japan, no problem, whatever the case. This has been a manga. This manga is stateside, and there's no to-do about it. I mean, there's not a lot of controversy surrounding it, so I don't think the Japanese company would come in worrying about stepping on people's
You
toes.
might be very surprised by that. A lot of the things that get changed in manga and anime in the US come from the Japanese licensors, a lot more than people realize. We talked a lot up on the site in the comments about Case Closed / Detective Conan in particular, and a bunch of the changes that were made came at the request of the Japanese licensors because they wanted it to go as mainstream as possible so that they could earn more money too.
Now, I have a question for you. When 4 kids turned One Piece into water guns and corncob pipes...
And lollipops.
Oh, lollipops.
Don't forget the lollipops.
Yes, the lollipops. Was that in response to a request from the Japanese creators?
That is hard to say. Now, there's a very long process when you're localizing a manga or an anime that's approvals. You know, you get the translated, script, you translate the script, you localize the script, you take the direct translations and make it make sense in English, and then you send that back to Japan. And that's before you've done all the production work. And Japan takes their time usually in approving it, and then you take their approvals, make any changes necessary, add them to the thing, and then there's another approvals process. Sometimes this goes on and on and on and on. That's why titles get delayed a lot, is because the approvals process blows chunks. And so no changes are pretty much ever made without either the Japanese company's consent or the creator's consent. Now, it can vary because the Japanese licensors, the companies that own things, may have a difference of opinion with the original creator. That happens on occasion. But things do not get actually changed in America without at least the people who own the copyright saying, okay.
Wanting to shift gears for a different perspective, talking about making changes in general, I wanted to kind of address how we view on this. Obviously, I want to see what that DVD was like in unadulterated form.
Absolutely.
I want to see what looks to be a rather serious, toned show. I could see, and I am a big fan of nudity in a non-hypersexualized way. When nudity has value as individuals and that natural state of lack of clothing has something for it. Nudity in Rin was essential to the characterizations. It helps set the tone for this. However, I wanted to note that so many works are works in evolution if this change came at the request, and they specifically said that the changes would be non-essential to the story and with the direct approval of the artist. And, we still flipped our lid. They're going to change this, they're going to do this. But how many times do works change themselves? Bakemonogatari itself, in its DVD forms, has had huge sweeping edits on several of its episodes, redoing different animations on the DVD from broadcast solely at the request of the creators.
Well, that's to improve it. The difference, I think, is between editing for improvement and editing to censor, and there's been some debate about whether this is considered censoring. I know a few people in the industry have come out and said, that's not what this is. Censoring is when, another party, the government, for example, comes in and changes things, and that this is not, in fact, the case. I haven't really formed my own opinion on that particular, what's the word I'm looking for? Nitpick? That said, of course I want to see the show in its original form. That said, it is hard to blame Funimation for potentially being overcautious about it. I'm happy that they're looking at releasing it unedited. I was unhappy that they were going to edit it in the first place. But, and I think this is, I think something I run into a lot because I know so many of these people personally, and I talk to them usually off the record about all the crazy shit that goes down and how difficult it is to do this work, that I feel a great sympathy for them being in that position. They were probably working on this deal long before Handley's sentencing even happened. In fact, for all I know, they might have originally intended to announce it as a total simulcast, or much closer to simulcast, because they announced it partway through the season. And then Handley's sentencing came down and they said, wait, we need to make sure we've got this right.
We need to not throw out underage vampire girls.
That kind of thing happens. And renegotiations and contracts are... imagine the approvals process and then make the changes that each side wants to make 1,000,000 times harder. And that would be contracting.
The conjecture I wanted to put out there was that this could actually be a defensive posturing and this could have been intended. They could have said, hey, let's tell people that we're willing to censor it, that we're being the over snotty ones, that we're being overprotective. And so when you guys say, why are you getting your panties in a twist here? Why are you getting freaked out by this? So now, I think in Navarre's position, they've built up a defensive buffer. Well, internet isn't really people, we don't all count. But in that way, if they've done this precautionary step, if they say, well, we're willing to go back and look, it makes it seem like they've gone through steps, they've cleared the process. So when you see this on a shelf somewhere, you're not going to say, oh man, where did this come out of left field?
I have heard fans suggesting that the whole thing was actually just a scheme by Funimation to draw attention to an unedited release. That said, I mean...
It worked if it did.
It did. It worked reasonably well, as long as they actually do release it unedited, because I think now if they go back and edit it, it's going to kind of start up another shitstorm. And I also think that some of the furor that came out of this has to do with the timing. I mean, we're looking at Chris Handley came down, and all of us, all the bloggers in particular, have been so adamant about how we need to fight for our freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Then you had Simmons Gate and all the discussion of plagiarism and piracy from that,
I still
which
love
got
that
fans
name.
really
Simmons Gate.
And then this happened, and so everybody was just really primed and ready to be so upset.
Well,
which is not to say that I think that their opinions would have been different. I think some of the sheer rage would have been slightly lesser if it had happened at a different time.
One addition, the Youth Protection Act. Coming from Japan's side, where they're looking at legislature right now to censor images of youthful figures that could cause arousal. I wonder if that has any factor in changing the landscape of Japanese-made decisions and how that could influence the decisions they try to make overseas.
It's doubtless something that they're thinking about. I do not know, because, it's so hard to know, even when you're within a culture, whether something's going to pass or not pass. Legally speaking, so I don't know what the mood is in Japan about whether they think, oh, this is totally going to happen, or that's never going to happen, or we don't know. But that's entirely a possibility to really consider.
Well, I think we've run this one pretty much into the ground. All right, there you go, Funimation. We're in support of whatever you do as long as it's the right decision. But I gotta say, when I finally see it, I hope this show doesn't suck, because I'm gonna feel like an idiot going to bat for this if it blows. Just saying. All right, catch you later, folks.